Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Horses is a very important issue as I represent the very northern part of California where wolves are being introduced or pushed into the state now. And I find it just fascinating that the comfort level with which urban legislators can just dismiss what the impact is when they don't have to worry about them in their backyard, in their parks, or they don't have to put their kids in a cage at a bus stop in order for them to be protected while the bus comes, okay? So this is it's a fascinating attitude to me. Earlier we heard about the depredation that happens in the cattle industry being not a big deal because it's only 1.5%. So if you have a million head of cattle that's consumed per year and you lose 6,000 of them, I wonder what General Motors would think of that if they produce 1 million cars per year and somebody stole 6,000 off the end of the line. Or let's say for a politician in a tight district, what if 6,000 votes were filched away from their election? I think it would get people's attention. It certainly does the rancher who's got the losses on that. So, Director Gerten, in 2009, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service acted in order to remove the gray wolf from the endangered species list. In 2009, the lawsuits from extremist groups continued to keep the wolf on the list because the service evidently doesn't want to make a move on it. So despite all contrary data, this is essentially providing guidance to state agencies such as California, who has moved to list it in California now that the wolf is being introduced into the state or pushed down from Oregon, etc. So we're just leading the states astray on something that the service has already provided for it to be removed from the list. Kind of like what we're dealing with in California, the Valley elderberry great horned beetle should have been delisted as recommended years ago, and we can't do levee project because there might be elderberries in the habitat. They've been fooling with that for 8 or 9 years. So it's a very frustrating process that we hear delisting and then it doesn't happen. So if they've already reached the population goals set by the service, I heard over 5,500 wolves in the upper Midwest, what criteria will eventually rely upon to say they don't need to be on this list anymore?
Congressman, the northern Rocky Mountain wolf population is about 1,900 animals, largely in Montana.
Is it a gray wolf?
Idaho. Yes, those are the gray wolf. Of those animals, 2 of the states manage them now under state control because they were delisted by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. That also included the eastern third of Oregon and Washington. Wyoming was subsequently delisted by the Fish and Wildlife Service. That delisting was overturned by a court, but we actually have oral arguments to appeal that Friday.
So why is it a state-by-state listing instead of, we have a gray wolf, we have 6,000 of them in North America. Why do they have to be distributed through every state, otherwise it's delisted state by state?
These animals starting to show up in Northern California came from the northern Rocky Mountain population. There are now probably 6 or 7 have been documented in the state of California.
Approximately 7.
They are an endangered species at this point. We're working proactively.
But they're not endangered if they're across the line in a couple lines in Colorado or something.
They would be endangered in Colorado.
Okay, whatever states you listed, we don't have time for, they wouldn't be endangered in the other state, but they happen to travel, so it's endangered in California.
Congressman, what I would also, for the record, state is we have proposed to delist wolves, gray wolves, in the remainder of the lower 48, except for the Mexican gray wolf subspecies. That was also overturned by a court. Our hope is that we get a favorable outcome for these 2 legal cases in western Great Lakes and in Wyoming.
So we may have some project down in the southwest, but we can still anticipate California will continue to have an endangered status?
No, Congressman. We anticipate if we are successful in getting a federal court to delist the wolf in Wyoming and delist it in the upper Midwest, we would then proceed with the rulemaking to delist the wolf in California and the rest of the lower 48.
All right, thank you for that. Mr. Moore, I'm going to run out of time here again quickly. What we're talking about in California right now, there's 0 compensation for the takings of wildlife. They won't even want to admit when it is one. Like there's a calf killed in, I think in Siskiyou County, where there was 5 wolves eating on it, but they weren't sure that it was actually could be attributed to wolves. So how would you say the compensation should work in California versus Idaho?
Idaho has only a small portion of federal money left for compensation. It's the only game species that does not get compensated for depredations in the state of Idaho with sportsmen's money.
But they do have a depredation process through controlling with
Yes,
hunting.
they do. It goes through the Governor's Office of Species Conservation.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.